You're watching the Team Nerd Tech Show with your hosts, Tim Gillen and Ruthie Kierlin.
Hello, nerds and faithful listeners of the Team Nerd Tech Show. Tim Gillen here, Terrapin Networks, Traverse City, Michigan. Thanking you for joining us again for this week's edition of the Team Nerd Tech Show Tech Digest for the small business owner. We've been doing this show now for 40-some episodes, most of 2019 here. And we've been able to put together some pretty interesting speakers for us to interview and talk to you about and talk to you with. So while we normally focus on tech news that relates to small business and maybe a tech gadget or two or a tech tip, we like to work in these interviews from time to time as a way to also bring in some relevance to the small business owner with technology. Often they, as will today's, because we have one today, often they seem to revolve around cybersecurity, and today's does too. We're going to be joined in a minute or two here by Scott Tabor. Scott is with the Cybersecurity Awareness Program at the Small Business Development Center of Michigan, here of our state of Michigan. It's part of the EDC down in Lansing. And in the meantime, though, before we get to Scott, we'll give a little more of an intro, but I'll throw it back over to my assistant this week and every week from Queens, New York, Ruthie Kerwin. Hello, Ruthie. What do you have for us?
Hi, Tim. So I think we're going to have a great conversation with Scott today. I'm really looking forward to that. Not only for this, we've talked to a lot of people who are cybersecurity experts, and we've talked to some people who are in the small business realm, but this is really marrying the two. So I'm very excited about this conversation here. This is episode number 42 for anybody following along at home. If you want to head over to teamnerdtechshow.com and search for this particular episode, we'll have more of our links and all of the information that you can use to find out more about the Small Business Development Center or about Scott himself or anything else that we talk about in the episode today.
Very good. So Scott, good day and welcome, and thank you again for joining us. We're just thrilled to have you on board. We'll speak for the next half hour or so, a little bit less altogether. So tell us a bit about yourself and the SBDC and what they do and your part in it. We'll give you a couple minutes here.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Ruthie, for having me this afternoon. So a little bit about my background. I am a former IT security analyst. I worked at Ferris State University helping protect all of our students' data, staff, faculty data, you name it. I was helping trying to protect it, implementing all the tools, policies, all that good stuff. Prior to that, I was a student actually at Fair State as well. I have a degree in information security and intelligence, and also one in criminal justice. So I kind of was looking to marry the two different degrees, and so far it's worked out pretty well for me.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, and so now I'm with the Michigan Small Business Development Center, and I've been with them just under 2 years now, and it's really seeing the opportunity back in Grand Rapids and being able to really educate people on cybersecurity and why it's important, why it impacts small businesses, how we can help them be successful in protecting their information that they have, really intrigued me and really made me when I go this route. It's such a, I think, an underserved area where small businesses don't have either the budgets, the ideas, the knowledge, the tools, whatever it is. We can find easy ways to help them really implement strong security measures that aren't inexpensive, that aren't terribly complicated, that they can really help protect themselves with. So that's a little bit about my professional background here, and now a little bit about the SBDC as a whole. So first, I do want to say we are funded through the Michigan through the U.S. Small Business Administration and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, along with some funds from our local network partners throughout the entire state. So we serve all, I believe, 83 counties is what's in Michigan, I believe, and we serve all the counties from the Upper Peninsula all the way down to Ann Arbor, Detroit, all the way down there. So we are everywhere you go. Some of the cool things that we do besides just cybersecurity, what my specialty is we work with all different kinds of small businesses, new ventures, startups, existing businesses, those who are looking to grow, or if you have an advanced technology company as well, we'd love to work with you. Some other things about us, we also work with export assistance. So if you're looking to have a product go outside of the country, we can help guide you in that process. Or if you're looking to really grow your business, we have experts in that. And one of the coolest things that we offer is it's no cost. So we offer no cost one-on-one business consulting, either no cost or extremely low cost business education. We do that through things like webinars or in-person events, along with no cost secondary market research for businesses.
That's pretty interesting.
That is
So
so cool.
yeah,
What a
that's a lot
great
of-
service to provide.
That's a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
What is your part in the cybersecurity side for a smaller company? So our focus here at Terrapin Networks is on small. We kind of made a little boutique computer firm, tech services firm. We've done this for 29 years and have had a lot of iterations over those decades. But what we do these days is real small companies, and by that I mean up to about 20 computer users. So
Yep.
5 and 10 commonly, 12, 15. Sometimes more employees than that because they may not all be computer users. There's a shop floor that may have staff out on that kind of thing. So, but generally smaller companies, I mean, to government folks, they'll think of small business being 100 employees and 150
Yeah.
employees, depending on the industry, especially. And so we've made a little market out of this real small companies who want to use technology to sometimes even to, frankly, to stay small. They have no interest in doubling or tripling in size, but they can become, using technology especially, can become quite profitable with in a smaller company using this technology, but still have the same kind of security risks and data protection risks as a large company. It's really no different now. The fact that those of us with a small outfit can compete against the big boys, as it were, is because of the technology, but of course that brings along those same risks. So what do you see on the smaller company sizes with some of the consulting you've been involved in and some of the different situations that you have seen? What stands out for a smaller company, for a business owner to think of?
Yeah, absolutely, and that really falls also right into our wheelhouse. You mentioned the maybe 5 to 20 devices, and that's a lot of what our clients are. Really, they are smaller on the small side of business.
Very good.
That there's that definition of like up to 500 employees, but most of our small business clients are almost the micro size, and so it's really kind of right in our wheelhouse. And so for me, they may not necessarily have the big budgets and obviously the big team for a big security team or even an IT team at that point. They may be using a service provider. And so some of the biggest recommendations that I give to our clients are deploying tools like two-factor authentication. It's one of the best ways to really secure your accounts from unauthorized access with it. You get that text message every time you try to sign in, or you have the authenticator applications where you get the passcode that gets reset like every 10 seconds to finish signing in with. I'd highly recommend strong passwords and really going more towards the passphrases. So that way it's something easier for you to remember, but it's 50, 60 characters long at that point, instead of the bare minimum of like 12 or 16 characters or whatever the rule is going to be for that particular user account.
So maybe some kind of sentence with random words and spaces, the whole thing.
Yep. Yeah. One of the examples that I give in the webinars that I do and in presentations I give is cybersecurity is important, 247 and 365 days a year, exclamation point. So, I mean, crazy long, but
that's a pretty good password. Yeah.
And you're not going to forget it.
I'm not going to forget it. Yeah.
Now, just I hope no one tries that password with any of my accounts. But,
yes. Just find Scott's email address and you're into everything. Right.
You have access to all of it.
I would imagine probably not. But
but
that's very good advice. We have actually whole episodes on that. Ruth, maybe you can. Ruth, you can dig some of those up.
I will. We've got a whole episode on two-factor authentication and also about strong passwords, password keepers, that kind of thing to use, and actually, like LastPass and all of that
Dashlane
too.
And actually, technically, multi-factor authentication, because sometimes it's not just
you're
two.
right.
Yeah.
It is not just two.
So we're trying to use MFA as much as 2FA these days, at least as far as how we describe it, because of the authentication apps, and sometimes there's a third thing. It's not just, sometimes you think of two-factor as just text, but
correct. Yeah. I've kind of switched to saying two-factor, because when I say multi-factor, it seems like my clients are going, what? I've never heard of that. I've had to change what I've said, because I always call it MFA as well too, because you got, you have the USB keys you can put into your computer. Then you can receive that text message or the authenticator message, and then maybe some kind of bio data like eye
Right.
scan or fingerprint
Right.
at that point. So yeah, it's more than just two factors.
Yeah. Tell us about the Small Business Big Threat initiative that you folks have. We talk a lot about small business, big tech, small biz, big tech. We've used it as a marketing tagline from time to time.
Yeah.
But this notion of small business, big threat, you guys have a particular initiative about that. Why don't you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, we do, and so it's really our cybersecurity program that we offer here at the Michigan SBDC. It was implemented a few years before I started. I'm now really the one in charge of it, and leading the push for it. And it's really about raising awareness and training for small businesses when it comes to cybersecurity, whether they're at the beginning stages of what is cybersecurity, why it's important to them in their small business, how cybersecurity impacts them,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to doing actual training sessions for their employees so they can do their annual yearly training, whether it's talking about things like phishing or good cyber practices, or don't click on the link in the email. So it's really our big initiative that we have here in the state of Michigan, and actually several other states have jumped on board as well with it, and then so it's really really trying to help educate small business owners and other entrepreneurs into to realize that cybersecurity matters. It's a threat to them.
So tell me a bit about how that would work for a small company here in our state of Michigan. I'm an accounting firm with I've got a staff of 9 or 10, let's just say. And will you do some training for my folks if we're able to put something together? If I have a small company like that, or if let's think of a provider like us, we're a services provider. A little bit different, as I've mentioned, but
Yep.
we're a tech services provider, kind of a tech team for hire. If we got several of our clients together who were, at least similar enough that it would make sense, you guys would put on a little training session.
Like a seminar or something?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah, it'd be either an in-person session. We could be a recorded webinar, designed either for the particular business or for a handful of businesses together, and really talk about what the concepts of cybersecurity, the basics of it, what to look for when we're looking for maybe cyber attacks that are happening against that business, especially coming through one of the last ones I did. They really wanted to focus primarily on things like phishing emails,
Mm-hmm.
and insider threats.
Those
So
are
we'll
big
talk
threats,
about those.
big
Yeah.
threats. You bet.
Yep, and we'll talk about like malicious insiders versus the accidental insiders.
Mm-hmm.
So we can really shape and create something unique for really what that business or the businesses are looking for. So it's really similar to a lot of the in-person events that we do as well, where if we're going to a particular audience, I want to speak on what really resonates with them the most, as opposed to just the standard, well, cybersecurity is scary and you need it. Well, let's talk about how we can help you institute it into your business, how we can help create that culture for your business, the either free tools or inexpensive tools and policies that you can implement.
And a lot of it is just policies, really.
Yep.
So for our listeners, it's a good thing to talk to your tech services team about whoever that is. We'll have a link out at our show notes at the teamnerdtechshow.com. Ruthie, this is episode, which did you say, 39?
42.
Excuse
42.
me. Oh, my goodness, I'm getting old. So, of course, we knew that. But so episode 42, and Scott Tabor and the Small Business Development Center of Michigan, the Cybersecurity Awareness Program. And that might be something to reach out to Scott's group with. We'll have some links there so that you can do that. And we'll be talking with our customers, our companies that we take care of about this, because that's, I didn't even know that was coming from our conversation. That's a really valuable
Absolutely.
thing. I mean, that's because sometimes, and once a year, maybe twice a year, or once a year with the email follow-ups, so much of it we find is just training. I bring up things to users, and it doesn't even occur to them because they're not aware of what these risks are. They don't live in this world. They're an accountant, or they're running a landscaping shop, or they're running a small cabinet making factory, whatever it might be, and they're not thinking of all this stuff. That's what our role is as the tech team. And so we'll bring up real simple stuff, or we'll talk about on something here, and it comes back to me, man, I wasn't even thinking about that. And so that awareness that you mentioned, Scott, is clearly that's a big deal. But if it's just out there, it's one thing. But if we can bring it right to people, that would seem to have a lot of value. What have you found out? What's the standout thing? So we've talked about these generic programs. Give us one or two things, actionable items that a small business owner talking to his or her tech manager what's the one or two things you would say they do first? Well, let's say the second and third thing. We'll call the first thing the two-factor authentication.
Multi-factor.
Yeah, the multi-factor authentication, MFA. What would you say is maybe 2 and 3, or 2A and 2B, or however you might want to think of it?
Yep, we kind of mentioned it already, but really I'm a strong proponent of password managers,
Okay.
and organizing them. That really goes not just to having good passwords, but to the password policies, and policies in general. And we said it. I think you mentioned it really comes all back to the policies.
Yeah.
A lot of small businesses. I did a webinar today where half the attendees didn't have an incident response plan. So for me, let's start with policies. Two-factor password managers, but after that, let's focus on your policies, because you need to have them. It tells you what you're trying to do, why you're trying to accomplish what you're doing with any of the potential tools that you might install or deploy. It gives you a reason to actually follow through with it. So policies are huge. If we're going past that, maybe that intrusion detection. That's a big one for me. If you can't identify that you have a cyber attack and they were successful in getting into your network, you're way behind the 8 ball at that point, because you're not aware that you may have that data breach. So being able to identify whether you have a log, like a SIM that can help you identify it, or just reviewing the logs consistently to help identify that you have an intrusion.
And to our listeners, that goes back to what you've heard me talk about as perimeter security, which is generally the firewall device. That's our fancy nerd way of saying a firewall. We like to see an actual physical device in between that and the business network, and would encourage you to make sure your tech team has done that, but also that they have some kind of logging set up, which has to be kind of turned on, and a couple settings made. It's not difficult to do for those of us who do that, but so when Scott talks about intrusion detection, we spoke with William Kimball a couple weeks ago with Cyber Defense Technologies out of Washington, D.C. They talked, if you might remember, about intrusion detection and knowing when someone's been banging away and how they might have gotten in, if they got in. Because as Scott's mentioning, we'll hear about these data breaches, won't we? And it turns out they've been inside the network for some big bank or some credit card for months, just lurking around because somebody didn't pay attention to that. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Those are both great advice, really good advice.
Yeah, and then lastly, data backups. Have to have them. Make sure they're working, and if you automate them, make sure it's actually backing up correctly, and that you can essentially verify the integrity of the backup, that you can also restore from the backup.
You have to do a restore test, don't you?
One of the worst things you can do is think, we're backing up stuff. 6 months later, you find out your backups have been corrupted for 6 months, a year, however long, and now what do you do at that point?
We've talked about, Scott, and maybe you can back this up, and if you have some other input, we'd love to hear it, that's one of the ways to get through a ransomware attack is with good effective backups.
Oh no, absolutely it is. Yeah. If you have good quality backups that are, and use the word up to date, so whether it's daily or every few days, you may only be out just a couple of days worth of data, and most businesses can recover fairly quickly from that.
Yeah, we have found that we have had customers who've had to recover from bona fide ransomware attacks, and the backup changes everything. If you've got good backups, you can restore. It's a hassle, but it doesn't close the doors and doesn't cost you $100,000 or.
Which is, that's the most important thing, isn't it? Keeping your business running.
A big deal, be able to keep up and running.
Kind of why we're here.
You still got customers waiting on you. You still got paychecks you got to write. You still got orders you got to get out, and you've created all this data. You just don't want it gone. So,
and you mentioned $100,000, and that's right around the average per breach for small businesses.
Is it? Now? Wow. Imagine that. So, imagine one of the things we ask we talk about here in the show, and I tell my customers, just imagine you walk in tomorrow morning and your data's gone. Now, if the building burns down, your data's backed up, you can rent a conference room in a motel room and get some tables and chairs with good backups, at least get running while you're getting things rebuilt. But imagine if you walked in tomorrow, not that it's not a hassle, that's a big hassle, but imagine if you walk in tomorrow and the data's gone. Gone now. There's nothing on your computers, or
that's your business. Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things we ask people is just to think about in your head, how big a check would you write to make that problem go away? And it's a lot of money. That can really shut the doors to a company. It really can it?
No, absolutely. And then there was an example of a doctor's office near the Battle Creek, Michigan area. They were hit by ransomware, and they decided they're close to retirement age. They're like, well, we're just going to retire and close up shop
Oh my
instead
goodness.
of instead
Wow.
of dealing with the hassle of
I'll be
trying to
darned.
remediate
Oh my
the ransomware
goodness.
attack.
Gosh.
Yep.
Imagine what a mess was created there. That's really too bad. I mean, you just hate
Yeah.
to hear that kind of thing. But
Yep.
you see these numbers from the backup firms and through the Gartner Group and one of some of those things that will say the percentage of major data attacks that will actually shut down smaller businesses is way higher than what you'd think.
Is
Where
it really
people say we just
how
really can't.
high?
I don't know. It's some crazy percentage. Maybe Scott knows, but even if it's 10%, that's a lot.
Yeah,
Imagine that.
absolutely. Yeah.
The people who have to just shut down or have a drastically compromised business that's a half as big as it used to be. It's not
Yep.
and it's not just an idle threat. It's a real bona fide active
Yeah.
threat. Yeah.
And then here's some numbers for you. I know
Okay.
StaySafeOnline.org with the National Cybersecurity Alliance. I believe they just reported around 10% of businesses who were hit by or small businesses hit by data breach close up shop.
So that's 10%.
Yeah, the Verizon, the Verizon data breach incident report, just from this past year, says that 43% of breaches were involved in some form of small business victims.
Oh my
So,
Wow.
goodness.
yeah,
43%.
Yeah.
we know we're the number one target.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We've
We're
talked about that a lot in the past.
Yeah, we have, haven't we, Ruthie? That
Mhm.
phrase we use kind of overdone. We're kind of the low hanging fruit.
Yep.
Mhm.
Because we don't have, as you mentioned earlier in this conversation, Scott, we don't have the big fancy security teams, most small companies. And they may have someone like us providing tech support, a service provider providing
Yep.
tech support, but no one's pretending that there's some big full-on cybersecurity team ninja guys out there. There isn't any of that. They're small companies, so we have to balance the expenses.
Yeah.
And so we tend to be kind of low-hanging fruit. So it's always good to make those adjustments that you can make. And part of that, as Scott mentioned, listeners, part of that is policies internally, because a lot of these breaches come not just when someone messes up the firewall when they install it, but when somebody internally inadvertently or sometimes maliciously, as Scott mentioned, but more often than not, it's inadvertent, clicked on a link they shouldn't click on, let somebody in without realizing they were, loaded a piece of software they thought was cute. It's actually a piece of malware. And next thing you know, you've let someone in. And so policies that are just spoken of very openly, not just once a year, but just here's how we do things. We have found that makes a pretty big difference once people kind of get their arms around that that's a good way to do things. Change the passwords, use long passwords, apply password complexity and length, and use password managers so not everyone's not using the same password over and over again or some minor variation of it. Those are generic recommendations that you would back up or that you folks talk about in your things. Is that
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of those, it's you said, the low-hanging fruits is how hackers look at small businesses, and so I'm trying to really help spread the message of let's address our low-hanging fruits. So
Good.
fix our passwords, to do the two-factor, have data backups, make sure you actually have antivirus installed on your computer. It's really one of the first lines of defense. Obviously, doesn't solve everything, but it helps prevent those forms of malware that are 15 years old that are still successful today because people don't have AV on their devices or on their servers, and so in doing those, essentially those inexpensive, those easy options, one of the best things you can do that I address a lot is doing your updates for your software, for your operating system, for the other applications you have, and do it on your mobile devices too. Those are free. We receive them every Tuesday for Windows devices, or not every Tuesday, but the Tuesdays that Microsoft sends it out.
Patch Tuesday. Right.
So I mean, those are all free services, free things that you can do that doesn't cost you a single cent.
Right.
And it can solve I think I read a stat that was like 90% of the issues. Having strong passwords, doing updates, and obviously doing data backups, you're really securing yourself in a really inexpensive and almost easy way. That you can really take care of most of the threats, and then the training and awareness of your employees about the phishing emails, about scam phone calls, or business email compromise, where the gift card scams right now that are really prevalent. Where I need $500 of gift cards, send those to me, and you think the emails come from your boss. So it's really simple things that we try to address that really go a long ways in protecting the small business.
Yes, they do. And it's security, as our listeners have heard me talk about for months now. Security is all just layers.
Yep.
And just like in your home or maybe your business, you've got 2 locks on the front door and 2 locks on the back door, maybe bars on a certain set of windows and maybe an alarm. Those are all layers. And that's how we think of all these things. So when we do the updates, we have good antivirus, we have good passwords, we have good perimeter. Bit by bit, these harden our tech system, just our
Absolutely.
network, but our tech system. And so what Scott's talking about has been echoed with what we've been chatting about, just and making it part of the way you run your company, part of the mindset. Here's what we do, technology. You don't have to even necessarily understand or be able to explain it, but these guys have drummed it into my head. It's probably worth doing. So think of it that way, because that's why all of us seem to say the same thing. It really does work. And it puts the advantage in your corner a little bit, because normally we're the ones being attacked. So we want to do what we can do. Us business owners, all of us collectively, business owners want to do those parts that we can do.
Yeah, and you mentioned well, they talk about it all the time. They drum it into your head, so it must be important. When it comes to creating a cybersecurity culture, it's difficult, especially for the non-tech people who are trying to create that culture within their business.
Yeah.
So it's something where I say, when you have your weekly meetings, or if you have a daily or a monthly meeting, whatever the case is, talk about cybersecurity for a minute or two.
Right.
Ask your employees if they've seen anything suspicious, if they've seen the phishing emails that have come through.
Just have it be a natural part of the discourse in your company.
Exactly. And it kind of takes away the scariness and the I don't know about cybersecurity, so we can't talk about. Well, have those easy conversations. Like we just started our phishing campaign here where I work. So I'm hosted by Grand Valley State University, so they handle all of our HR stuff, and I'm an employee of theirs. And we just started our phishing campaign to test our employees again. And it was funny. I walked into the office and our student employer's like, "Hey, I got this phishing email." I'm like, "Oh, good. You didn't fall for it, right?" It's like, no, we didn't fall for it. We actually called and reported it. They said, "Good job. You identified the phishing email." So it's just casual conversations like that help build and create that culture, and really raises everyone's awareness level of what's happening to that business.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm sorry to say, Scott, I think we do have to start wrapping this up. We could sit here and talk about small business and security and passwords for another hour at least.
Yeah, this is
yes,
fun.
We could.
This is fun stuff. For us nerdites, it's kind of enjoyable, isn't it? Yeah,
it really is. Time flew by here.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's fun.
Well, how can businesses in Michigan contact you with the SBDC? They could just go to the website, or do you have a hotline or anything like that?
Yep, I would direct them to go to sbdcmichigan.org. They can learn about all of our services there. They can also sign up for our one-on-one business consulting there as well and become a client of ours. It's really easy to do, so I would recommend that. Would probably be their best route to go, is go to sbdcmichigan.org. To sign up, and they can get a hold of me that way, or they can, if they have other business questions that aren't cybersecurity, we've got experts in virtually everything that you can do with small business.
What a great resource. What
Excellent,
a great resource.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
truly.
Yeah, outstanding resource.
All right. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me again this week, guys. Again, Tim, and for coming and hanging out with us this week, Scott. Thank you again. For you listening at home, this is, again, episode number 42. You can look up any of the past links that we've talked about today, or conversations about SBDC at teamnerdtechshow.com. And you can always call in and leave us a voicemail, or if you have any questions or issues or anything like that you wanted to bring up after this episode, our phone number here is 231-668-9175. And you can send us an email at teamnerd@terrapin.tech. So thanks a lot, guys, and have a great rest of your day, okay?
Thanks. And thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Ruthie. Yeah, thank you, Tim.